everybody, this is Deborah Anderson coming to you on behalf of Dragon Blogger Technology and Entertainment. And today we are talking about Camtasia 2 for Mac. Now I've actually been using Camtasia for a little while, so I will share some of the tricks of the trade with you today. We're going to look at a file that was recorded at PubCon Las Vegas 2015. It was a fun little interview with a cigarette girl that was there. But first, let's look at some of the settings on Camtasia before we load that file and start working with the file. Okay, before we get started working on an actual media file, let's look at our workspace. And that button that I just clicked, it was blue as it was highlighted. It's a way to show the left pane, and that is your Assets and Effects pane. The purpose of clicking the button is to hide or to show that particular pane. Again, the Assets and Effects pane. And why would you want to hide it? It's to create more space for your workspace. That black spot in the middle is where we will work with our file, as you'll see a little bit later. And by the way, there is a pane on the right-hand side that we'll talk about a little bit later, and that's your Properties pane on the right-hand side. So the pane that we will be using the most is the one on the left, your Assets and Effects pane, and we'll go through the sections in that pane in a little bit. You may be wondering why this is an issue at all. For example, if you're using a desktop machine that has a huge monitor, which I have on my desk, it's actually a TV, and I just love it. It's a great way to do video editing. Then this is a non-issue as far as the hiding and the showing. However, I'm actually demonstrating this video on my tiny laptop. I mean, my laptop is basically one step up from a tablet, and it would fit in my purse. And that is something that I love about Camtasia, is that it has all the power of most of the other high-powered video apps, but like I said, it fits on the laptop that fits in my purse. So, sorry Camtasia, my favorite video editor is actually Final Cut Pro. And it's very beefy, and it takes a lot of CPU, and I don't put it on my laptop because I do need to have some space for other things. And that's where Camtasia 2 just knocks it out of the ballpark as far as being able to have that power packed and yet fit on a laptop that fits in the purse. Guys, sorry, I don't think it fits in the wallet quite yet. Anyway, so that is the advantage, and you can actually do everything that you need to do even in a small space, which is why I'm demonstrating this video on a small space. So now that we've talked a little bit about the workspace, it's time to import media. I like to import it in a right-click system, but let me show you the file method. You can actually click on File and then Import Media. You can import from Google Drive, you can import from other places. It's easiest once you get going to just right-click in that spot and import your media directly from that black spot. And you'll see as I add it, the Bling video, you'll see it pop into that spot and see why it's pretty easy as you get going to work quickly in your workflow process. Now this particular video that we're looking at has actually already been processed, so you'll see some other things that we've added to the video, but that's okay. I can still show you some effects with it. So the first thing is, once we've imported that media, is to add it, and we want to add it down below. It's kind of like Photoshop with layers. And as you can see, we slide it to the right. I want to hook it up right to the far left and watch. It kind of clicks right into place. That's because I have snapping on, and as you can see in your view, it says enable snapping, and there's a little shortcut there. That allows you to click right into place. And if you don't have that on, you run the risk of having little gaps in the video. That means somebody will be watching the video, and if you've clipped something out of the video, all of a sudden there's this black spot, it just kind of blinks. So sometimes you don't want it enabled if you're really doing fine tune, but sometimes you do want it enabled. And we're just looking at the video that was created. As you can see, there's some little doodads that we added in Final Cut Pro when we worked on it. I'm going to take a moment to look at views. And there's some different advantages and also settings. What I've done is I've reduced it down so that you can see the entire video. And you see how there's black spaces at the top and the bottom? You wouldn't see that if you were zoomed in. Now what you want to do is adjust the canvas to get rid of that black space, and you can do it at various You can do it various ways. One is custom. Also, fit to visible is the easiest setting. And what that does is it expands the video to take up that black space and get rid of it. So now we have a nice clean video with no gaps. And we're going to undo that and look at a couple other options and ways to do that. And we can also drag it from the corners and manually adjust the video to take up the black space there so that we don't have it anymore. And we're going to undo that again and look at another setting. And we're going to put back to fit to visible. Now, in order to get to that point, I simply right click, and that's how I access that. Now let's change the view to 50%. Works well on this particular laptop so that we can actually see the detail, because obviously we were zoomed out too far to see the detail previously. Now I'm going to tell you about something that you should never ever ever do, even though I just did it. This is me, the pro sound engineer, coming to you from Los Angeles Film School, saying what you shouldn't do. Do you see the audio file? That's what I'm circling there. And the audio file is showing us that the sound is going all the way to the top, like off of the bar there. And as you can see in the settings, see, we have a chance to look at the properties pane. There's a film strip, and there's also an audio. And on the audio, that's where you can adjust the audio. Since I have the whole thing selected, when I change the audio from 100% audio down a little lower, you can see the whole film strip there where it shows the audio goes down. Now we're just going to do that again. If we had smaller clips highlighted, it would just be that one particular clip that we had highlighted. So we're going to lower that. Now, that's great that it's not all the way to the top, but that only affects the volume. If you notice on the strip, you still have like this plateau looking sound, and that's not good. That's called overdriven. Now sometimes that's a desired effect, like for instance Kiss is playing, or sometimes they're playing guitar right up and they want the feedback, so they play it right up to the speaker, and there might be an intentional reason that you want it overdriven, but in general that sound is not a pleasing sound, and it's not what you would want for an interview where you want a nice clean sound. Now, this particular case, the reason it's like that is because we were at PubCon. This was one of the very last interviews, not trying to make excuses, just explanations. And everybody was tearing down as far as the PubCon, and people were laughing and getting giddy, and that was great. And, you're hearing bangs from the different booths coming down and a lot of noise. So all of that's coming in. That isn't just our cigarette girl that's making a lot of noise here. That overdriven is actually coming from the sound. So similar to if you were hanging out at a carnival or a big party or a concert, you would get that overdriven effect. And there's not a lot that you can do in a live environment. You can use different mics. It goes a little bit beyond what we're talking about today, but you can use some mics that will help. But otherwise, if you're in a really noisy environment, you are going to get that. So in that case, you may want to just use the pane, the properties pane on the right hand side. You're clicking on the audio and you're bringing the volume down, but that's not going to fix that plateau. Not everything can be, as we used to call it, fix it in the mix. So now we're looking at the film, and as you can see, we can scale that. So if we wanted to just scale in on the microphone, or I'd rather scale in on Portia, she's gorgeous, we could do that and have the video all about Portia's face. Okay, let's continue talking about properties for film. And one of those is the opacity, so you can actually affect how much of that, like the see-through aspect. So if you wanted to have an overlay that was somewhat transparent, you could use the opacity setting. There's also rotation, and you can rotate it. You can use the different settings. If any of you use Photoshop, it's very similar to those types of settings. So you can really play with how it appears. And the easiest thing if you're a novice is literally to play with those settings rather than to try to scientifically explain them right now. Besides, it's more fun that way. I'm going to close the properties pane, and now we're going to go look at the fun stuff over on the effects, the assets and effects pane. So we pop that out, and we're going to go through some of the easier ones to use, and that will get you going having some real fun with Camtasia. Now first there's the annotations. That can be used for several different things, including adding a lower third after the fact. Now on this one we've already added one on the post-production and Final Cut, but you can also add fun things like a blast, and you can put notations there. If there's, let's say that you've worked with a video and you forgot to add something in the speaking portion or your voiceover, this is a great place to add it with an annotation. You can also use those to type out, for instance, your website, advertising. The sky is a limit. And likely many of you have already used annotations, for example, in YouTube, or you've seen them in other videos. And so it's just a matter of picking the annotation that works for you. And on the annotations, I don't have it set here, but you can pop out the right pane, the properties pane, and that's where you can actually change the color and do all sorts of things for your annotation. Now, as you can see, the annotation, the red blast, was added to a layer on the bottom above my media asset. Now if you drag it below the film strip, you're not going to see it. As you can see, there's no little red blast there because the film strip is covering it up. The same type of thing as you would think of in Photoshop and other apps. So we want it definitely above the film strip in order to see it. Now what I've done is I've added a transition to it. And the transition is a fade in and fade out, so you can actually see that blast fade in and fade out. I can also extend the blast if I want that blast to be there longer. And again, it's fading in, fade out. Now the easiest way to add the transition is just to drag it right on top of whatever it is that you want to have transitions, because it will add the transition on both sides. If you add it to one side, then you have to actually go drag to the other side. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm actually extending the effect. So I want the fade to be a little bit slower going in and going out. And we can take a look at how that works. And you can see that the fade is a little bit slower coming in, and it's a little bit slower going out. So there's different options here. So again, you can choose your annotation, whatever you're doing with the annotation, and then click to show the properties pane. Remember, that's on the right side, and the effects, including the annotations, are on the left side. And you can add other things like transitions to your annotations, and you can play with them and change them. So there's a lot of opportunity for customization within Camtasia. You can also remove it by simply clicking on your transition and hitting the delete button or backspace and remove it. Now I've added another type of transition, and that's the fly in, fly out. So that's another fun one. You can even mix and match the transitions if you want to have, maybe fly in and fade out. So there's different options there. And on this one, we decided to have a slide in, slide out. You can see it sliding in from the left, and then it will slide out again to the left. And remember, with all of these things, if you want to change some settings, it's on the properties. But if you're new and you don't want to have to worry about learning everything, you can also use it right out of the box by adding things and playing around with it and not having to mess with the settings. So it's your option. It's one of those things that you will grow in skill set over time, and the more that you use Camtasia. We're going to play around a little bit with this video. Now, normally in most videos, I would remove that mic that's on the left-hand side. It just so happened that when we grabbed Portia on her way out after her shift, literally, I mean, we didn't grab her like assault her, but literally we asked her, hey, could you just run over here and can we do a quick video? So in this case, we didn't prep the space, and there is that microphone in the space. So we're going to play with this video and make it all about Portia. And as you can see, it's just like other applications where you can modify using the crop tool, and you can actually crop just to Portia's face, and then all of the rest of the video, even myself, removed Now there is the blast does now pop over her face, which we don't want to cover up the beautiful Portia. But this is the way that you can modify your film strip so that it's actually only showing the portion that you want to show. So if there's something like we showed you the microphone that you want to remove from the video, you don't have to go re-record it. You can remove it by using the crop tool. Now if you notice, we moved the blast so that now it doesn't go over her beautiful face. So there's a lot of opportunities to add some fun and also to modify and edit it so that's exactly what you want. And Camtasia allows you to do that. Now so far we've just been talking about annotations and transitions, but you have so many other options. For example, you could add another media file. Remember how I showed you the overlay option as far as the transparency? This would be a way that you could add another media file, maybe a little bouncing bunny or something, to your project, and you would change the transparency so that you could still see Portia and have this bouncing bunny that's going across the screen. Now, you want to keep in mind too, as far as the layers, like I mentioned before, if you add something, you want to make sure that you're adding it above your film strip, otherwise you won't be able to see it. So the same thing goes for media files. Now let's take a look at some other fun stuff that you can add. You can add a smiley face in this case. So right below the transitions you have animations, and that's a really fun spot to add things like smiley face, and it's animated because it will actually draw just like a whiteboard. So we added an animation, a little smiley face to Portia's already smiling face. There's other options and animations. Now there are other things besides smiley faces that you can use animations, and we're going to use a zoom in functionality. And we're going to play that so you can see exactly what happens when we do the zoom in. If you watch a red blast, it's sitting there on the left, and then it pops to the middle, and then it pops out. Now it seems really similar to the transitions, but the difference is you're adding the animations in the middle of something, in this case the annotation. So it's a little bit different. It's not like you can add a transition in the middle of a clip. We're going to undo that and actually do something a little bit different. There are some video effects that you can add to your file. For example, changing the color, making a color adjustment, and you just pull that onto your film strip, and then on the properties, that's where you actually make the changes. Just like we mentioned, that's where you make the changes for annotations. So in this case, I made Portia completely black and white, and I can change the levels on how bright or how dark, and we can add the saturation level. So we've added a little bit of color back into Portia's film strip. So depending on what effects you want to create with the color, you can do that. You can go for sepia, you can go for distinct or funky, different color adjustments there. There's all kinds of different video effects that you can play with. The green screen is something that Camtasia has available for those of you who are advanced users. You can do a green screen chroma key, and what that is you film yourself in front of a green screen. You can even use a green sheet if it's well ironed and it's the right color green, and then you select that color and it will actually cancel out. So it's like making a transparent background on yourself. Now if you do that, a little tip, make sure you're not wearing a green shirt unless you want to be transparent, and maybe that's the effect that you want. Now we're not doing that to Portia because Portia's already been recorded, so that's something that you would want to record yourself in front of a green screen and then actually do that functionality after the fact. So, and by the way, it doesn't have to just be green, it could even be blue. The key is to know what portions you're going to have chroma keyed, in other words green screened out and transparent. So it's a little bit of an advanced topic, but it's good for you to know. Even if you're a newbie, it's good for you to know that Camtasia does offer that option. So here we're adding some audio effects, and Just like on the right-hand side when we're looking at the film strip properties, you can look at the audio properties. And for those of you who are not sound engineers, these audio effects are really handy because there's a lot of presets that you can add that way. So again, it's an opportunity to play with those. And here we can move the file around. I've separated the film strip from the audio, and that's something that you can right click and you can detach the audio, and then you can even add some more effects to the audio. I mean, you can add it to the file when it's connected and when it's detached. That final group, there's cursor effects. If we had a mouse that we were using within the demonstration, like a webinar, you could add the cursor effects and it will actually highlight that mouse as it moves about. When we're all done, we get to share it to screencast.com, YouTube, Google Drive. This is your way of exporting the file. I tend to like to just export. I mean, maybe a little bit old-fashioned, but part of the reason that I use a straight export is because if you're doing it, you're sending it to YouTube, is it convenient? Yes, it's very convenient. However, if something goes wrong or your internet connection is interrupted, then everything stops and you don't even have a portion of the file. So I prefer to export it and then upload it separately to YouTube. It's not quite as convenient, but generally speaking, I tend to have a higher percentage of success. So if something fails, you see, like exporting it to YouTube, if something fails electrically or internet, you don't have anything. If something fails on the internet while you're exporting to your hard drive, then nothing is wasted. You still have the file. So there's just a less of a chance of failure, and that's why I do it that way. But you can certainly put the settings in for YouTube and do it that way as well. There's so many different options, even beyond the effects that I've shown you. You can do clips. I love that Camtasia allows you within the Mac to use, I call it squiggle, but it's actually the command key, but squiggle T, and you can clip parts and then you can just pick them up and move them around. So if you want to modify your video and what shows up where, you can do it that way. If you feel like you got out of order on your interview, this is a great way to move, maybe question 3 should be question 5, and you can move it that way and pretty much just play with it any which way you want. But that squiggle T, that's your key to clipping, to actually make separate parts. Now do keep in mind, if you have detached the audio from the video, then what you'll want to do is actually select, for example, the video and do your command T to clip it, and then right away select the audio and do the command T to clip it there so it's clipped in the same position. That's if you've detached it. If you haven't detached it, then it's no worry. You could just do the command T anywhere on that file and you can work with the clips. And that method is actually easier than if you detach the audio. So really my recommendation is don't detach the audio unless you absolutely have to, or it's out of sync with the video and you want to sit and tweak it. Otherwise, just keep the file together. There you have it, guys. Just some basic tips for Camtasia. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section on this blog post or in YouTube, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks all for tuning in. This is Deborah Anderson on behalf of Dragon Blogger Technology, and we have been reviewing Camtasia for Mac version 2. Now, just a little note before we go. There isn't actually a Camtasia Studio for Mac. There is a Camtasia Studio for Windows. However, that said, Camtasia for Mac is only $99, so there's an upside to that. Thank you for tuning in. Again, Deborah Anderson on behalf of Dragon Blogger Technology.